Hello everyone, this is your Ecology Lecture 7 walkthrough. We're going to talk about population growth. So let's start with the first question. What factors influence the rate of population growth? So I'm not looking for anything too fancy, just the 4 basic factors that actually changes your population. So if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense, I think. There's birth, which increases your population size. If you have a lot of birth, then obviously you'll have a very high rate of population growth. And then the next one is death. Death decreases the population growth. And if you have a lot of death, your population growth is probably going to slow down or even the population size might even go down. The next one is immigration. Somehow I feel like we talk about this. And then the other one is emigration. So immigration, remember, immigration is moving in and emigration is moving out. Yes, I have indeed talked about this in the Ecology lecture 6, but one more time. So these are the 4 factors that influences population growth. And then you want to think about which one increases the growth of a population and which one decreases. In this case, you have to take in effect all of the factors, so birth, death, immigration, and emigration. So if you have birth more than death, then obviously your population size will increase. But if you have more death than birth, then your population size will decrease. If you have a lot more birth than death, then your population growth rate is going to be high. Growth rate is going to be high. And then if you have immigration versus emigration, so if you have a lot of immigration, then that means your population size will also increase. Okay, so let me turn this in a different color so it's easier for you to see. Now, when you're doing the test, like I said before, when you're looking at your answer choices, right, you want to draw some arrows. If you have a lot of birth, then you want to draw an upward arrow. And if you have a lot of death, then you're going to draw a downward arrow. If we have, let's say, decrease of birth, that's going to be downward. If you have increase of death, that's going to be upward. So you want to make sure that you're paying attention to all of the words that are related to the question as well as the question itself. Is it asking for a population that's growing really fast, or is it asking for a population that's kind of, smoothing out a little bit? Our next question is, what is an age structure? So if you look at our slides, here it is. Age structure is the number of females and males of each age a population contains. So if you think about America, for example, let's say we have a certain number of males who are 20-year-olds, and then a certain number of females who are 20-year-olds, and then we also consider all the other ages and how many number of males and females we have. That would be your age structure. And the reason why we talk about that is so then we can think about how fast is your population is going to grow, because if you have a lot of really, really young people, then your population is probably not going to grow really fast until those really young people grow up a little bit. If you have a lot of deaths, for example, then your age structure is going to look different from a population that doesn't have as many deaths. And then among these animals, only females can reproduce. So when you look at a population, you also want to think about how many females do we have. If you have a lot more males than female, then your population growth is probably not going to be that fast either. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, some factors that we want to think about when we talk about population. Make these bigger. The next one is R and K. So I could never remember this until somebody brought this up yesterday, so I'm going to give it to you. So R versus K. We can think about K as a kid. So when we talk about a kid, we're talking about a human kid. So the human model will be K. So if you look at this chart right here, not this one, right here. So the K is more of the reproductive reproductive strategy of human beings, which is we only have a child once in a while, right? And every time we have a child child that's very well developed, and we put in a lot of energy into producing that child, right? So if you look at the K strategy right here, you have long lifespan, right? A chimpanzee or a human being has a pretty long lifespan. We have very few offspring, but each offspring is expensive. It takes a lot of energy to make that one offspring. And then there's a lot of parental care, and then the environment is generally stable. So let's look at the question. Which one produces more offspring? The answer will be the opposite, which is R. Which one produces less offspring? The answer is going to be K. Which one produces expensive offspring? That's the human kid, which will be K. Oh, okay, what happened here? Sorry. Which will be K. And then which one produces cheap offspring? That will be R. And then which one lives in stable environment? That will be us, human beings, which is K. Just K. And then unstable environment will be R. Okay? So if you can remember that the human model where we have very few expensive offspring living in a generally stable environment, then that's the K strategy. And the opposite of that will be fish, for example, will be the R strategy. They have hundreds of eggs produced every time a fish reproduces, and the fish also reproduces a lot more frequently than a human being. The next one is population density. Remember, population density, there are two factors that you need to consider. You need to consider how many individuals are in this population, and then you also need to consider how much space is this population taking up. So what is the population's density? How many individuals in a how many individuals per certain area? Per area of space, I guess. It's a better way of wording it, per area of space, right? So for example, if you have 500 people per 100 square meters, then you can translate that into a mathematical calculation, 500 divided by 100, which equals to 5. You should never write just 5. 5 what? 5 people per square meter, right? And then you can compare that to, let's say you squeeze that 500 people into an even smaller room, 500 people per 50 square meter. Then that will equal to 500 divided by 50, which equals to 10. So 10 people per square meter. So if you think about it, if we squeeze the same amount of people into a smaller room, then the population density is going to be higher. Everybody is more close together to each other. And that's how you calculate population density. So I'm going to make you do that on the test for sure. Make sure you don't get the people and the area backward. You have to do people or population size divided by area. So if I ask you what is the population size right here, population size is 500 people. But if I ask you population density, then you have to take in consideration of how much area this population is taking up. The next one is density dependent and density independent limiting factor. So what is the limiting factor? Limiting factor limit the growth of a population or limit productivity. We talked about this quite a few times, right? The environment can only hold so many individuals because there are a lot of limiting factors. There could be predators, there could be disease, there could be a lack of space, there could be a fight for competition for food. All of those is going to limit the growth of your population. Your population is not going to have an exponential growth that just keep going up because something is going to come in the way. Well, actually, a lot of things is going to come in the way to stop that population from keep going up. It'll then slow down. The population growth will slow down and then reach your carrying capacity. So that's a limiting factor. Here you need to know the difference between density dependent and density independent limiting factor. So right here, if you look at our slides, here are some examples of density dependent limiting factors. So first off, what is the density dependent limiting factor? That means this factor, this one situation, increases as we increase the population density. So take human beings as an example. What are some problems that show up, or what are some things, some factors that changes as the human population keep growing bigger, right? So for example, there could be a lack of space. So space is a density dependent limiting factor, right? The space will then limit how fast your population can grow. Food, for example, there's always a fight for food, even though it doesn't look like, you have food every day, but not the entire world doesn't always have food, right? So that's a density dependent limiting factor. The more population we have, the less food we have, and the more competition for food we have. So competition is also another density dependent limiting factor. So all you have to think about is this factor changing because of how your population size is changing? If this factor, for example, competition, increases as the population density increases, you would know that that's a density dependent limiting factor. Now we need to consider density independent limiting factor. A lot of the times this is an abiotic factor, but it doesn't mean that all biotic factors are density dependent, and it doesn't mean all abiotic factors are density independent. So you just have to think about it. Think about what makes sense, right? A density independent factor could be a drought, for example. You wouldn't have more drought because there's more deer in the area. You wouldn't have more flood if you have more deer. If you do have more flood, when you have more deer population, higher population size of deer, then you will call that a density dependent limiting factor. So the result of this is you'll have a population crash if there is a density independent limiting factor, right? If you have flood or wildfire or hurricane or drought or whatever, a lack of oxygen in, I don't know. But so do you get it? So you need to consider whether this factor is changing with the population size. That's it. See you at the next video.